And here we are.
Here we
We're here. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to our audience and our distinguished guests today. So this is Containers from the Couch. I'm sure everybody, we have a good set of regulars. So for those of you that continue to watch the show, thank you. Thank you for coming back. For those of you who aren't familiar, we talk all things containers on AWS and just containers in general. And in that same vein, we actually today on the show have Docker.
Oh, you have the shirt.
I saw the top of it. I saw the top. I knew it was coming.
I don't have that shirt.
I can arrange that. I can fix that.
Oh, nice. All right.
That's a big deal because I was going to say, going to conferences for many years, the one shirt that was always the hardest to get was the Docker t-shirt. And I'm very thankful that one day I was able to get this. I don't know how. It was like the last one on the shelf. It's like 3 sizes too small, but I said I want it. And now I wear it.
Someone just didn't want to pack a box back up and ship it back to Docker.
Yeah. Being somebody that worked at those conferences, that is a true statement. I did not want to bring those shirts home.
Yeah, you probably have a ton of it.
I do have a ton. And the joke was in the beginning is Docker was a t-shirt company, right? We had a lot of t-shirts.
Maybe they aren't hard to get a t-shirt from, Adam. Maybe it's just hard for you to get a t-shirt.
Well, I think that could be.
There was a lot of people, and there was a lot of different ones. There was the editions, like if you have the Holy Ship one, that was a limited sort of like really popular one from the beginning. There's like the experimental one with the whale that was like on a balloon. There's a lot of them. It's like GitHub stickers. Like everybody wants the different editions and the different cool stuff.
That's true.
Yes.
Every GitHub sticker I've seen is different. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
And amazing, yes.
Should we introduce our guests? We have guests on the couch today, by the way, if you didn't notice out there. If you're only looking at the top half of your screen or something weird like that, look down. We have a couple guests.
We do. And I'm gonna
and I talk a lot, so.
So below me, we have Chad from Docker. Chad, why don't you just, quick hello, introduce yourself so I don't mess it up.
Hi, I'm Chad. I'm from Docker. I'm an architect at Docker. I work on our cloud partnerships, and I work with a bunch of our other partners. I've been at Docker for a very long time. I think I've been at Docker I think it'll be 7 years in October, which is the longest I've ever worked in any one spot. It's kind of blows my mind. I do a lot of this. I do a lot of talking to folks about sort of the new stuff that we're doing, how that's going, and that's more or less my job at Docker.
That's impressive. 7 years at Docker. Like I know so I've come from startups also, and I know startups like you measure a year in dog year terms, and so that's
people get less time for murder.
Yes, that's a good point.
I like that. And then, okay, so I'm going to try to do that. Yes, I did it. And then in the corner here, we have Jonah, who's a partner solutions architect at AWS. Jonah, you want to do a quick intro? Talk about yourself?
Sure. I'm a partner solutions architect at AWS. I work with container partners like Docker, who I didn't even know it existed for 7 years before a minute ago, and other container partners. So, yeah.
Nice. And, it's speaking of that 7 years, I remember 7 years ago, I think that was what, 2013, right? Or 2020. I forgot. I have no concept of time.
14-ish, like somewhere in there. The last 6 months have been kind of hard on time for me. So.
Right. It really is all blended. But I remember when Docker was like, this is really amazing. You can't use it in production yet, but oh my goodness, it's so cool. And then all of a sudden, we were all using it in production. It was just like you flip a switch, and then it's like, why aren't you using Docker in production?
Yeah. So that was terrifying on our side too. Before Docker, I was at Puppet. Before Puppet, I worked at Clutter, and I was on the ops and infrastructure side. And watching people put Docker in early. Like, oh, okay, you could do that. But I mean, actually, it's all over again. So we already have folks asking about this, the thing we're going to talk about today. Like, can I take this to production now? Or when can I take this to production? And I think it really just talks about like, it's solving a problem and people are like,
Exactly.
awesome. So now that problem is solved. I have 10 more problems. So let me just set this one aside and go to the next one so I can get my stuff done.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. I remember, the problem that Docker was solving for us and hearing that whole like not ready for production thing. I think I was probably one of your customers that did it anyway, just whatever. The problems that we have, that don't include running in production are so numerous that this solves that we may as well just take the risk. So we were super early into Docker.
And it was a game changer, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
my first experience with Docker was like, whoa, why? I mean, I built Proxmox servers, OpenVZ, and it's like, why am I doing this when I have Docker?
So just as a quick question, real quick survey. What was the first Docker run that you all remember doing? What was the first container? Because
I mean, I technically did Hello World. I think
Hello
that was
World.
the first thing.
Okay. What do you, Adam? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Jonah, do you remember?
I think I did Flask on like a college project.
Flask. Redis is a really common one for folks that have been around for a long time because that was sort of like that was the Hello World before we got around to writing the Hello World.
Nice.
I think it's because it's just complicated enough that people are like, oh, I wouldn't actually know how to run Redis if I just had to run it out of a tarball. And so it was a good example. But it's it's an interesting one for like you type 5 characters if you don't want to specify a tag, which nobody does. And then you get something up and running. And that was good enough for a lot of folks.
I definitely remember my first image that I built was like a full-on CentOS. Oh, look, Justin, same thing. Full-on like CentOS operating system. I basically sysadmined my way into a Docker container and then realized how wrong that actually is. But it's you just go with what you know to begin with, and even that was game changing because it was just so easy to do compared to like trying to automate a VM build, which was in my mental comparison. That was what I was essentially doing at the time, and it was just so much easier to just type things into a text file and Docker build.
Yeah,
so
I think that's also one of the powers of Docker is that you can start and get a tremendous amount of value with having a very little amount of sort of understanding, like Docker run, and you can use other people's stuff. And then you can figure out Dockerfile, and then you can build it, and then you can learn how to do a Dockerfile a better way than the way you started. And then you can get to multi-stage build, and you can do an even better way. And then you get to sort of more complicated things, but you don't have to do any of those things from the get-go. You can just run somebody else's stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. By the way, Anton is out there. Good to see you again. Look what we have here. A couple container guys. Happy Monday Gray team. Still staying with the matching wardrobe. I like it.
It's never intentional.
I know. I don't know how it happens. And you were even like you intentionally even picked a special T-shirt for today, and still it's gray. So like Adam just picks gray T-shirts on the same day that I pick gray T-shirts, and it's worked out that way.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like Jonas and I are wearing black, so I don't know how that happened either. So it's like a color gradient. Oh, it's blue. Oh well,
Dark blue. Yeah.
Well,
we can't tell.
We gotta get better.
Yeah.
Just go with it. Just go with it.
Stick with it.
There was a theme going. At the bottom, we had a gradient. It was fantastic.
But so on that note, I think this is a good time to transition. As you can see, I'm really good with transition points. But so you had mentioned earlier we were going to talk about something. So what are we going to talk about today? What are we going to demo?
Well, I think we should talk about the new integration between Docker and ECS. And so it's been out for a while, and I can't remember because time is blurry, a couple months. But really the goal here is, in my head, shortening the developer's commute. And I don't mean like the highway commute. I mean all of the work that I have to do before I can actually do the job that I really get paid to do. And so,
Love that.
a lot of this is around, like, if you look around now, like, what do you have to do to actually write code? Like, I might have to get a cluster up and running. I might have to learn something new because my team switched to a new tool, all of these pieces. And in my head, this integration lets you get the best of both worlds. So, you probably are using Docker. You might be using Compose, and you might want to run that in AWS in one of the managed services. So there are things you could do. You could go learn the managed service. You could go learn the ins and outs of task definition. You could learn how to transition from Compose to task definition, and then potentially maintain that, because you probably want a local development environment. You probably also want your cloud environment. And so really what this got to was like, well, maybe you could just use Docker and just get there. And so we worked for a long time with the containers team to come up with what's the right mapping. How do you map something from Docker into ECS? It was close, but there wasn't like a one-to-one. And so the plugin that we're going to show today is really the culmination of that work. So it's in beta right now. There are lots of people using it. They want to use it a lot more. It'll GA a little bit later. Y'all in the audience, you pick the juice worth the squeeze for what you want to do with this. But there are things that are coming like every couple of weeks. So we just added support for update. So when you guys did your unboxing, right, you would have to tear it down to update. So if you made a change to a container, you would tear the whole thing down, do it again. Now you can just compose up again, and we'll pick up that there's updates. We'll update the task definitions. We'll use sort of the default rolling update mechanism within ECS to update those things. We also added secrets support for actual application secrets this last time around. There's a lot in it, and every 2 weeks there's going to be more. So that's just a long way of saying, like, this is really cool. Let's show you what's in there now, but just know that, like, there's a lot more coming. So decide where you are.
Like, it's really fast moving. That's pretty incredible. Every 2 week release cycle and new goodies to play with every 2 weeks. I love it. That's awesome.
And so if I can ask, how are you prioritizing, kind of requests that come in or features that you're implementing in the roadmap?
Jonas, if you could go to Docker/roadmap on GitHub. So we have a roadmap just like sort of everybody else does. And we have sort of in the first pass of this, we have sort of 5 kind of milestones that we outlined in the beginning. We're sort of in the 4th milestone now, which is like updates and secrets. The 5th milestone is going to be sort of volumes. So like typically the first thing you do is you start with something that doesn't need a volume and then immediately do something that needs a volume. So volume is coming. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that's sort of longer out. So people want GPU, people want ARM, people want, right now it's ECS back to Fargate. People want ECS back to EC2. There's lots of things that folks want. So you can go in here, find or create the issue you want, and then we prioritize sort of also working with the ECS team for things that they have coming down the pipe to make sure that we have sort of the best of all worlds.
That's fantastic. I love that it's publicly available so people can see, and they can, as a customer, as a user of Docker, to ECS, if there's a feature I want, I thumbs up it, add a comment saying, hey, here's why this is important to me. So maybe I can, get that bumped up on your.
Yeah, so you can see here, there's a couple, there's ECS service scaling as we're writing it. There was also there's a better local experience. So in this case, it's making, like, you still have Docker local, but you make Docker local, in this case, feel a little bit more ECS-ish. And so that's that local developer experience. And so then there's some things that are going in, and we'll talk about context here in a minute, because if I don't ever stop talking, we'll never get to the demo. But go here, vote for things, create things, all of that, and we'll go from there. But you can see a couple that exist: the EC2 instances, the ARM GPU. Those are all big sort of requests that we have.
Nice,
cool. And by the way, Twitch, if you're out there and thinking about questions, definitely throw them in the chat. we'll work on getting them popped up on the screen and answered as soon as it makes sense.
Yeah. And if you hit issues, that's ECS plugin. That's where you can go file the particular issue for, like, hey, this isn't working for me. There are definitely some. We've also talked to a lot of people about, and you guys talked about it in the unboxing, the credential piece. So like everybody's credentials are different, and we're working with the Copilot team to sort of unify an ECS credential experience. So like the way that AWS CLI works is slightly different than Copilot, which is slightly different than ECS plugin. So we want to fix these things. Some of this is dependent on what I understand is the new version of the Go SDK from AWS. And so there's just it's one of those things that when you get two big companies, or we're not a big company, y'all are a big company. When you get two companies working together where there are lots of teams, like there's these independencies where we're waiting for SDK support to get to here, to do this, to that. But because it's a plugin, we can release it quickly. And so that's exactly why you saw at the beginning, we didn't have update, because we wanted people to start using it and telling us what they think. We don't have this other piece just yet. We'll get it out there, and nice. We'll update it.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, in the unboxing episode, remember, Brent, we had talked about following that provider chain and
right.
You folks listened, and now there's some change, coming forward with that. So that's cool.
And it hasn't been that long. It was like, right. I mean, again, calendars don't really work for me these days, but the fact that I remember it means that it hasn't been that long ago. So like, this is moving fast.
Yeah. And as Jonah and I were talking about earlier today, like there's some better things we could do, but also like we use Okta with Federation. And so the pieces work for us because of the way that our particular federation setup is working. And I realized that not all federation setups are the same. And so like it turns out that AWS credentials are a complicated thing. And who would have thought?
Indeed they are.
So let's just talk real quick before we jump into it about how you get it. So if you're on Linux, you go here. And if you're on Mac or Windows, go get Docker Desktop Edge. And it's in the Edge version. We'll roll it into stable soonish, but it lives in Edge for Mac and Windows users. And then it's fairly simple to install for Linux users. You just grab a binary and put it into a path. I will tell a trick right now. This is like just for y'all. There's a bunch of paths that it suggests, like, oh, you can put it in user local lib. You can put it here. You can put it there. Just put it into $home.docker/CLI-plugins. And it just works. And you don't have to put it into for people that are like on Cloud9, it's just going to be a lot easier than just, figuring out like, where did Cloud9 put Docker and where do I put this? And just put it into home.docker CLI plugins and it'll work.
Oh,
you heard it here, folks.
It's like a built-in path or
and if you use the Docker 4s, it has higher precedence. So the one that we ship to you, if you want to use a bleeding edge one, you can get precedence over it.
Wow.
Nice.
Awesome.
Very cool.
But let's actually show something.
Yeah. And by the way, link to the roadmap up on the screen.
Oh, nice. Look at that. So we're in Cloud9 here, and we followed the Linux instructions. So just to show, I saved a little bit of time just on the install here. Just so that we can see that everything is working. Let's verify that. So we are able to get back to version.
Beta 5.
Yeah. So Chad covered context a little bit. Do you want to go over what those are really fast, Chad?
Yeah, so you might remember, like in the old days, you could switch an environment variable called Docker host, and you could point to different Docker hosts. You could have one locally, you could have one in EC2 that you connected to remotely. And that was just not a really great experience or a scalable way to do it. So originally, context was just a way to switch between, say, engines, or back when you might have Kubernetes or Swarm, you could switch between those. And what I've been thinking about for a long time when I was working on this initially with AWS is like, we should just have a context for places that can run containers. If you can run a container, I should just have a context for it, and I should just be able to point to it and just go. And Docker run and Docker compose should just work. And that was the genesis behind this sort of partnership, or at least this part of the partnership. We've been working together for a long time for lots of reasons, but this particular one, that's what it is. So in this case, you'll see that there's two contexts. There's default, which happens to be the engine that's local, and then we create one, which in this case is called AWS, which is the remote. And you should just be able to say like, oh, use default, do this. Oh, perfect, I'm done. Now switch and use the remote and use the exact same commands, and it should just go. It should just work.
That's slick, and that's really like an end-to-end, truly seamless experience. You know, using the same command line utility, same declaration of your manifest. Very cool.
Yeah, and that was the original promise, right? Was portability. Like, let me just run this thing and run it anywhere.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, we always talk about portability with customers, and there's the word portability and the definition, but then there's like all of these different areas to which that word might apply. And so seeing it get applied, even more universally here at the command line is I think pretty huge. I think customers are going to love this.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really interesting. We were talking to a member of y'all's technical field the other day, and they took a 4-year-old compose file, updated the version from 2 to 3.8, and then upped, and it just worked. Because in the end, it's just compose going out to the endpoint to run containers.
Yeah,
Awesome.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. So,
and there was a quick question, and I don't know, maybe we want to come back to this. Maybe we'll touch on it, but question from DFNDZ. One recurring topic for containers is security. Could you elaborate on what some of the latest improvements for Docker security on AWS? So I don't know if that's in the context of ECS here, but I would imagine it is.
Yeah, so the couple we just added secret support, which we're not going to be able to demo today, but we can talk about, where sort of Compose had secret support, and now we can take that and then just launch it in. So one of the things that we'll show, and I should stop talking so we can show stuff, but behind the scenes, this is all just getting mapped to AWS. So secrets just happen. We'll generate one and create it in Secrets Manager and then wire it in. And we also have a couple of those other secrets for like how you get your hub credentials in there. So in terms of like those sorts of security pieces is we're just working together to wire in sort of existing AWS security paradigm thoughts. Same thing for like Jonah and I were talking about making the roles a little tighter and like all of those other pieces. Like that's really what we're focused on is the goal here is to give you a best practice out of the box experience. And then if you need something special, also let you bring your own ECS cluster, your own VPC, your own whatever. But out of the box, make it developers, just give them a safe place to sandbox.
Nice.
So I think that's the fastest answer for that I can give.
Yeah. And the starting point that you guys picked was to deploy to Fargate, which has its own inherent security qualities that come along with it too. All of the tasks being confined to their own VM. So, mitigating any container breakout concerns. Sure. And, being in a VPC and dedicated security group and all that stuff. So I think, security works together at a lot of different layers. But yeah, just being able to take advantage of what's already there for security is definitely useful.
Yeah, and like a load balancer only if you've got ports, and then we expose the ports that you asked for, and I mean, all of those pieces, sort of the end-to-end experience for like, and then wire it all together and have CloudWatch there, and
yeah.
But you don't actually know anything about that unless you want to.
That's the best part, is like you could fumble your way into being, on a really secure, very performant platform, without really any effort. So,
right. So let's show some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I'll just, I guess, start from Linux install. So we already have a context configured for AWS, but normally you would have to run this Docker ECS setup, which is an interactive setup here. I'm just going to show you what it looks like really fast. And so this is where you'd enter your context name. So I already did one with AWS, so I won't go through it. So you'd enter in your name, the profile, and your access credentials.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
And this experience will change in a little bit when the plugin comes into main. It'll just be Docker context create, but it'll be the same sort of flow.
Yep. Awesome. And then there's an example app in the repository here. It's ECS plugin example. It's a Python Flask app. So what we're going to do is we're going to build the app, push it to Docker Hub, and then we'll launch it, and Fargate will pull from Docker Hub. So the first thing, and I've done a little bit of this ahead of time, just because I don't want to expose my Docker Hub credentials to everyone on Twitch. But
and if you need us to drop the screen share temporarily while you type something in, feel free to just let us know.
Oh, no, that's okay. So you would normally run this command right here, which is the Docker ECS secret create, my key. And then what would happen is you would use your Docker Hub username, and then you would create an access token in here, right? So I created one, I call it the Hub personal access token. And then you can actually, what's the command again, Chad? Is it Docker ECS secret
ls?
Yeah, okay. Secret ls. And so we can actually...
that's a smart one. So, contexts are going to be different because different people have different levels of support for things. So we'll tell you, like, default doesn't have ECS because it just doesn't.
Yeah. So we can
nice.
See I've made
That's
a
cool.
few.
That's a really slick integration. I like that.
Yeah, and so this would also work for like other secrets, like the compose secrets that we just added. And in the end, these are secrets managers. You're going to use the ARN basically to tell compose, hey, this is where this thing is. And so in the compose file, you'll see it, how we use it. But it's a pretty slick way to get sort of the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And is it just Secrets Manager right now, or is there SSM parameter store support?
Right now, it's just Secrets Manager, but that's
cool.
I think you both know that underneath all of this is just CloudFormation. So like, it's just a pull request / some curly braces, right?
Yeah.
It's just that easy.
Yeah.
Don't forget the commas.
Yeah, there's some commas. So you'll see here, you'll see this X parameter, and you'll see a bunch of X parameters in Compose as we go on. And those things basically, so we open source the Compose spec about the same time we announced this partnership. Compose had been open source, but the spec had been something that sort of lived inside of Docker. As part of this, with AWS and some other folks, we open sourced that spec. We started making it broader. We started thinking about how you would map other orchestrators and other things in here. And one of the things we noticed was like we didn't really want to add a whole bunch of stuff to the spec, because part of the reason that Compose is awesome is that it's much simpler than other options. But you still need to get some of this information across. And so the way we solved that was xparams, which is basically just a way to say, hey, Compose, you have no idea what this means and you don't care. Just pass this on to the back end, who behind you knows what to do with this. So in a local, if you did Docker Compose up local, that local backend does not care what this X parameter is. But when you go to the ECS backend, it does know, and it knows what to do, and it wires it in.
Nice.
That's cool.
Yes. And so just to point out too, right now we're pulling it from Docker Hub, but they have an example in this you can walk through to actually upload it and pull from ECR as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So in the make file, there's a way that you can create an ECR repo and push it there and use the xpull parameters for ECR.
Yeah.
And do you just have, for the ECR example, do you just have to open permissions through IAM to allow those pulls, or is there some tie-in that Docker goes and updates the policy on the ECR repo to allow those pulls?
That's a good question. I haven't had to do anything, so I just assumed that the policy got taken care of for me when I tested it. So I am an old C developer back in the day. So I wrote this example and I have make files. And so there's a make ECR create sort of whole, it's all sort of documented in how I get it to work. So I didn't do anything special. So I think the integration takes care of it.
Awesome.
Yeah. I can actually look in this make file here. So it looks like you basically do an ECR login, and then that's what you would create as the secret when you make the secret.
Yeah, so you create the repository up top, and then you
I don't see with the create repository. Normally, you would have to I think have another command to open, pulls from. I don't remember what it is exactly, but it's like all authenticated IAM whatevers to allow it to pull from, other AWS services. So the fact that doesn't exist makes me think that the service must be handling that for us. That's really cool.
Yeah, it works. It works super well. I've done it with the ECR one right when it launched, and it was awesome. It worked right out of the box. So
one thing to remember, and this is important for both Hub and ECR, is that ECS can't see your local image cache. And so lots of folks have had trouble because they're like, I built it and it's not working. You built it locally and ECS can't see. It'd be a trick if ECS could see your local image cache.
Right.
But you need to make sure that you push to wherever you're going to run it before you actually tell Compose to go off and try to build it in ECS.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we have this Docker file. So just showing how it would normally flow, you would start with Docker Compose locally. And even though the expo is in there, like Chad mentioned, it wouldn't hurt anything. Our app would still work. And then in Cloud9, you can open up a console tab, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that new
terminal?
New terminal?
Or do you mean to see the browser?
Look at browser, yeah.
You can preview as long as you're running on port 8080.
Okay, it's 5,000. I don't know if that matters.
I don't think it'll work, but maybe you could curl it in another terminal.
Yeah, you could probably curl it. You'll just get some HTML.
Yeah, but that shows that it works.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do the nice one. There you go. It worked. Yay.
A lot of JavaScript. Great.
So the previous example for this, it was like the simplest Flask app in the world. It literally was just text. It just dumped out timestamps, and I was like, that is terrible. We need to at least make this look like it was real. I don't like. I mean, they're toy examples serve a world, but they just become so outdated so quickly because people learn Docker really quickly. And I think that if you have an example that's even just a little bit more than just toy. Like I want to take this example and I want to do multi-stage builds. I want to add unit tests. I want to do all that stuff and be able to show like, this is what you're actually going to want. And so if you cargo cult this, well, that's better than cargo culting the other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here, we're using our default context. So this is actually going to push it to Docker Hub for us, right? Because we have this set up with our Docker credentials.
Yeah, and that's a good point to mention. Not all backends are the same, and ECS doesn't have a build capacity right now. So you have to build in default if you're going to build a container. Because ECS currently, we're working on some other ideas for how that would work, but you need to build local and then push.
Nice.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I'm just showing that we're using this image here. It defaults to Docker IO if you don't put in a URL.
Yep.
And then now here's the magic, right? So this is where we'd actually launch into ECS. So it's Docker ECS goes up.
Yeah.
Switch context.
Oh, good call.
Yeah, you need I'll send you my terminal bits for. I get the context, much like you have that master branch notification. It helps when you're using multiple context.
That would be cool.
So the eventuality is, and you're using BuildKit. So you get the nice experience with all of this stuff. So if you use sort of the standard Docker builder, it all just streams and it looks crazy.
Yeah.
Build kit, you get each of the lines, each of the lines times. It's very nice. So, for those at home, export Docker _ build kit = 1. And
we've talked about that a couple of times on the show now, but since you're here, is there ever a reason to not use build kit?
Build kit is like the Gmail of Docker. It's in the beta label for a long time.
Why isn't it the default yet?
We're working on. It will be the default. I think that is definitely the goal. You might notice that there is definitely some Indiana Jones golden idol switching going on right now. Like if you look at some of our other plugins with other sort of cloud providers, there's clearly some like Docker rewrite magic that's happening under the hood that folks aren't seeing. And part of that's just around, Docker, the command line had always really had Docker local, and that tie was fairly strong. And now pulling it out so that Docker local is actually just a backend, of which there are many, that's happening, and of which build is one as well, so that it's a little bit more modular. So there's some plumbing under the hood that's getting reworked as we speak that'll make that better. You'll also notice that here you're using Docker -compose. For those that don't know, that's written in Python. It's been around forever. We're rewriting that, and eventually it'll be Docker -compose, because compose will be built into Docker CLI, and that'll be written in Go. That'll also change, sort of in the GA timeframe of this all. So, we're weighing the bag of sand to figure out whether or not the rock is going to crush us, and we're it's taking a little bit longer than I would like.
Hilarious Indiana Jones reference. Wow. Yeah. Example load balancer. So, by the way, if you haven't seen build kit, this is one of the cool things about it, is it shows you all the high level steps and how long each step is taking or did take. And this is just yet one more time that we get to highlight that load balancers take a long time to come up compared to everything else.
Everything else, yeah. But this is actually this is my favorite, because it makes it feel like stuff is actually happening. And the other one, when the sort of the default builder, when it just spews, it just seems like noise versus like something's actually happening.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
Well, there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes. I think that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't or take for granted, is that simple is actually really hard. It takes a lot of work to do simple. Like if you see that compose file that we just looked at, and then compare it against this, or actually you can type Docker ECS convert and actually just see the cloud formation and see what gets expanded. There's a lot of expansion there's a lot of density in the information in the compose file that gets expanded to quite a lot of information in the cloud formation side. And so a lot of things that you don't specify or even know are happening. So like the one that got me was Container Insights, which I didn't turn on anything about Container Insights, but when I went into the console and saw that it was on, because I was going to actually look for CloudWatch because I wanted to look at the logs, well, that's pretty cool, because I didn't even know that was something I was going to get as part of this. So.
Nice. So I think you did answer this already just by virtue of talking about CloudFormation, but T. Sergeant Green says, is it using CloudFormation under the hood? And
it is.
Yeah, the answer is absolutely yes. And that's actually really, I think, a really cool thing too, because we can, Docker can sort of take on the responsibility of managing that CloudFormation for you, and you don't have to worry about it. And you can stick to just the compose format, Docker compose files that work locally, that you can hand out to all of your developers, and they can bring up their own environment locally. And then when it's time to run in the cloud, change context, come up in the cloud, just exact same workflow.
Yeah. And, if you've got an operations team that builds stuff and they hand it to you, in this flow, we also have a way for you just to basically hand us components of that. So hand us the ECS cluster, and we'll just use that, or hand us a VPC and we'll just build on top of that. Because our goal is like, we will not have enough flags, nor do we want to be in the business of like solving everybody's individual need for like, I need my ECS cluster to look this specific way. But what we found is like for most developers, there's a safe, sane default that's probably better than what they would be using by themselves. So let's just give them that. And if they need something else, they can bring it.
Nice.
The times where I've done things like wrong in the spec too, and it auto deletes everything is super nice, because there has been dev tools that just leave stuff stranded. Don't use confirmation.
So let's go look at this, but it's a good time to say like, this is actually one of my favorite features of ECS is that sort of the scale to zero is that as a developer, I can just do compose down at the end of the day, and I'm not running a meter anymore. But my cluster or my context is still there. So when I come back the next day, I don't have to go rebuild something.
By the way,
it's still there.
You don't, the cluster, assuming no EC2 instances are running, you're not paying for a cluster.
Exactly.
And you're not worried about a cluster being out of date, needing an upgrade. That's all fully managed in the control plane with ECS. So
Right.
That's a really great point.
And that's part of that shortening that developer commute, right? I don't have to do that. I don't have to take care of it. I don't have to spin up a new environment every time. So yeah, it works.
So this is our app.
Amazing.
This is live. Anyone I mean, this is a public application here, right?
Yeah.
We should post it in the chat.
Do you want to show the Docker Compose, or sorry, Docker ECS Compose logs?
Yeah. I was trying to create a little bit of timestamps. So anyone's welcome to come hit it.
But so basically, just really quick recap. You deployed this locally. You changed 0 in your compose spec. You changed your context to ECS.
You have to
Docker
set up
compose
the
up.
AWS context.
Yeah, but then Docker compose up, and now your app has been deployed to ECS in basically 225 seconds.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And if I wanted to update, and forgive me if I'm jumping the gun here, but you had mentioned earlier about if I were to make updates, would that if I were to change something, it wouldn't take 225 seconds. It's not rebuilding a load balancer. It's just going to update my task definition or whatever it is I added, and only deploy that.
That's right. So it actually, Jonah will probably be able to tell me exactly this, because we are using the default rolling update policy. It might take 5 minutes because of the drain, but you could also force that by just killing the older task faster. But we do the standard ECS rolling update for you. So the task definition N is sitting there. Task definition N+1 is coming up. When that's done, it just does, and you don't have to know anything about that. But if you know something about that, you can make it faster.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Very
Awesome.
good.
So it's Docker ECS compose logs, right?
Yep. So this is part of that wiring, right? So I know how to do compose logs, and this is the exact same view that we saw when I did Docker logs locally. And they're also sorted by, is it the front end or is it the back end? They'll stream in. By default, we tail it. But really what this is us going to CloudWatch and taking the CloudWatch APIs and bringing it to you. You could go into the console right now and see this exact same view in CloudWatch. Use CloudWatch tools. And same thing if you do Docker PS or Docker Compose PS or Docker ECS Compose PS.
Yeah.
This is the same view that you would expect as a Docker user, but really what it is it's calling into the AWS SDK to get us this information. So if you want to find that port, you can go there and find it. It's pointing to 5,000, and you can just copy and paste that and launch it out. And so we have there is a world where you might have lots of different customers have different takes. I think, and some of the other folks I've talked to at AWS, that you would have a cluster per application, especially because it's so cheap to get this. I know that we have some customers that have cluster per dev team, and so they're gonna stack these things. And so having sort of the the Docker PS, like, see what's happening is going to be important for some folks. And it's just also nice as part of that shortening of the commute and using the tools you like. What tool makes sense in the place that you are right now? Like, you're in a terminal, so just PS and logs, or you're in a browser, so just go to the console and search there. Or you're tracking down some like really esoteric bug, and so you want to go to CloudWatch so you can do like a regular expression across the logs and dig into it. Well, that's great. You go to console. Use the tool that makes sense in the context you're in. No joke intended.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. By the way,
I've
you
been
see
clicking
my
timestamp a lot.
Brent was here in the logs.
Oh boy, we better be careful.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Maybe we should stop tailing them now.
Yeah, we're done now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just opened a door, Brent. That
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so basically your app's deployed, and now you're able to do it. You compose PS, see how many services are up and running, and then also tail the logs
That's
of
right.
those services running. That's man, that's pretty nice.
And you mentioned, compose down. How much gets torn down when you compose down? Does it take out
So that's
everything or what?
right now it does, and that's part of the.
I mean, I think I'm okay with that. I was just curious.
Yeah, right now it does tear it down. So the expected flow is compose up in say the morning, then compose up as you update. So as you made a change to this and it saw that there was a new image, it would push that effectively maps to a new task definition, then the rolling update. Same thing for like the secrets piece. If you change the secret on text, we'll go update the credential manager. Credential manager will notice that'll change the task definition. That'll roll out a new update. And then at the end of the day, Docker compose down, we tear everything apart. That way the load balancer is not running a meter for you and everything else. There are folks in like the production space that are like, there's folks that are like, oh, well, let me do that. And for most of those folks, what my suggestion is like bring your own so that you can just use the bring your own functionality. And
if you bring your own, it won't tear it down, I assume.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because we basically, it's sort of like garbage collection, right? I own this thing, and so I'm responsible for its maintenance versus I don't own that thing, so I don't want to tear it apart because I don't own it.
Yeah. And T. Sergeant Green asked, can you customize the resources in the CloudFormation?
So you can do, maybe you can do the Docker ECS compose convert just to show folks what it would look like. So you can take this Docker ECS compose convert, dump it into a file, and tweak it all you want. But this is a one-way. This is a one-way ticket, right? So that wouldn't get reflected backwards. The other thing that we've talked about, we haven't shown here, is you can use whatever your tool of choice is to build some of this infrastructure, tweak the various pieces and parts, and then take effectively the ARN for whatever you've built and give it to us and say, like, use this ECS cluster, don't go build one, and we'll do that. But if you give us if you say, hey, Docker, take care of this for me, we just give you a consistent experience that we work with AWS to make sure it's the best possible experience in terms of like safety and all of those sort of pieces to balance for a developer. Yeah, what's the right choice for this person?
Yep. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So
And even
go
ahead.
So there's one really cool tool that I don't think gets highlighted, but like I always thought it was really impressive. If you've used Docker Compose developing a lot, the way that you have microservices call each other is you just call the Docker Compose service name, right?
Yeah.
And all of that gets abstracted behind the scenes using Cloud Map and Service Discovery. So it just works still. And
So maybe go open the app real quick.
Yep. And ECS.
The code, just app.
Oh yeah.
App.py.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Cloud9.
So it's app/app.py. So you'll see here when we call out for Redis, we just ask for the backend. And if we go look at the compose file, we'll see that there's two services, the front end and the back end. And so in this case, the front end can be addressed by front end, the back end can be addressed by back end, and we take care of the rest. And so, yeah, that gets put into Cloud Map. There's Route 53 in there. And all of that happens, and you don't have to know anything about that. You just get service discovery.
I love it. Another thing, go ahead. Sorry.
In the future, there'll be ways to broaden that out. Like, that you've got multiple stacks and they're in the right spots so that their service discoveries will work together. Like, that's another thing you'll be able to do.
So I notice also you have a dependency. Your front end depends on back end.
Yep.
And one of the things that BuildKit let me see was that the back end came up and was up and running and healthy before the front end started coming up. So even that dependency translated over to ECS so that it brought up one service and had it running before the dependent service needed to.
That's a cool call out. That's a good call out.
And it's in the CloudFormation. So it gets put into the CloudFormation so that the tasks themselves are aware that like the back end needs to go up first. And so there was a question: is the compose down the same as count zero? No, compose down is like nuke it from orbit. There is nothing scorched earth. There is nothing left at the end of compose down, which is different than count zero. So count zero is literally scaled to zero, and we don't have scaling in now. It's something that we're working on. We were surprised. We thought that like a lot of folks for like sort of the dev flow wouldn't necessarily want like auto scaling, but immediately, I think also because a lot of folks who use compose use scale, they're like, we want that. I'm like, okay, we'll get it. But like count to or compose to zero would be another way to implement sort of like leave the machinery running, but take all the services down. But you still have to, in that case, you still have to know that you've got a load balancer running. The load balancer is not free.
And people, it's funny. People are weird about paying for some things versus others. Like some people are okay with a load balancer staying running, but the NAT gateway, they just, are ready to, cut everything around it. They don't want a NAT gateway. They don't want to have to pay for it. So they do things like run in public subnets instead of in private subnets, which actually I should probably ask, when you bring a container up, is it in a public subnet or is it in a private subnet?
Well, we'd have to look at the formation. I'm pretty sure it's in private, but
and these days I'm actually okay with it being in a public subnet because of this whole NAT gateway controversy that I've experienced or seen customers talking to me about. They don't mind the security that comes with security groups and having their container come up and be accessible directly, even though it's going to be through the load balancer. It's totally fine for them. And so they would rather do that than put it in a private subnet and have NAT gateways.
Yeah, so that's one of the things the security group is. Basically, if you're in this right now, the way I understand, and I think you guys talked about this in the unboxing, if you're in this stack, you're in a security group, and so the containers can talk to each other. And there's probably optimizations of that we could take in the secure way. Just like I was talking to Jonah this morning, there are certainly permissions. Like we could go through and get a permissions tailoring for sort of the default permissions. One of the things I would love, I have always wanted this, is like give me like the AWS version of dry run and spit out a list of permissions. Like what did I touch when I did this thing? So that I could start that tailoring a little easier. But
I don't know if you've ever worked with SE Linux, but back in the day when I did, there was a command audit to allow. Yeah. And it would just read everything out of your audit table and write a rule that allowed everything that it just read. And I feel like
there is something, by the way. There is with the AWS CLI, there's an IAM tool that you can command that you can run that will tell you like what you've touched, what your particular role or user has touched. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Well,
I have
we'll
to find it.
Some other time we'll do it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I need that in my life because I have tried and failed so many times at IAM, and it's just this constant iteration, and so having a tool to at least partially automate that for me would be really nice.
Well, Jonah volunteered to help me sort of narrow this down, so I'm gonna put him on the spot on live, that he's gonna help me do this.
Yeah, in 2 weeks, right? Because there's
not
a
quite
release
that
every
fast.
2 weeks.
Not quite that fast.
Oh, I gotta find that tool. I will post it on Twitter afterwards.
Yeah, find it. Send it directly to Techie Stories too. She would love it.
Yes, and you know, I wanted to. Speaking of IAM though, when you were looking at the cloud formation, I did notice Secrets Manager. Your permission was scoped. It was least privilege, right? You weren't scoped to open all the secrets in the world. It was tied very specific to that secret that you defined in your compose file.
Yep.
So, I mean, I see there's best practices built in to this, you know, well architected, least privilege, all the right things.
Yeah. And that's the goal, because in the end, you know, if I'm a developer and I'm trying to get this done in AWS, I want to do the right thing, but sometimes the right thing's hard. And so if you make it easy for me, well, then of course I'm going to do the right thing, because that's actually the easier way to do it than something else. Yeah. And so I think that's really what the goal was for this, was to do exactly what we just said. So we built something locally, we iterated on it, we said, okay, that's good enough, I want to take this somewhere else. And, you know, 2.5 minutes later, had something up and running. And so it should be I think it's really the fastest way to go from like the marketing word, right, from code to cloud. So like, but it is kind of a good description. Like I have a project and I want to get it deployed, and I don't want to change anything, and I just want it to work. Well, this is it.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, just run my container, you know, and now that's basically what this is. Finally, just run my container in the cloud.
That's right. Yeah. And the place that you want to run it, because you want to run it somewhere, and I want to help you run it somewhere.
That's amazing. So that was a pretty awesome demo. And yeah, so the Weathered Arc said, I think you guys are talking about the IAM Access Advisor and Access Analyzer, by the way. So that is one piece, but there is a part of the AWS CLI, and actually Cholmang in the chat should know this. Cholmang is an AWS employee. He would know, because I was talking with him about it, and I can't remember. We have like no time left in the show.
I know. Cholmang is now called out live.
But anyways, I promise you I'll post it on Twitter. And but there is something that just tells you what components you've touched, what resources in AWS you've touched, which could help.
Yeah.
You know. So
nice. Well, Chad, Jonah, thank you so much for joining us on the couch today. And I love everything that's happening with this. I definitely want to keep track, keep up, and pay attention, because this to me is it like hits home with developers, such good workflow. So I can't wait to see what else happens.
I appreciate it. So if you need to find me, I'm just Metcalf C on Twitter, or you can come find me and my cohorts over on YouTube on the Docker channel, and we stream every Wednesday at 10 Pacific. And so we'll do more about this integration and other things coming down the pipe from Docker. So awesome. You can find us there.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
And until next time, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much.